But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
And we are live. Hello and good day to our listeners. Welcome to HBR News number 147, The Biological Effects of Fatherlessness. I am your host, Brian Martinez, and I am here with the polecats, those nosy critters that ferret out the best feels, funnies, and what the fucks to discuss Slam Bam Badger style. Prepare your amygdala, because we are going in dry. Today's polecat panel consists of... I'm hearing sounds. What am I hearing sounds? All right, I guess I'm not.
That's your amygdala.
I was hearing sounds. Yeah, it was my dry.
That's what happens when you go in dry, Brian.
Oh, I see where it's coming from. Hold on. My other computer that I use to manage what's going on was playing the audio. That's what. Okay, so we're good now. Today's polecat panel consists of Max Darrett, the jaundice skin, Simpsons kin. I'm done doing the character thing because it's just I'm all out. I'm sure.
Oh, come on. Okay, I got one.
Okay, go ahead. What do you got?
Simpson skin and definitely not Max Power.
I don't know.
Kudos to anybody who gets that reference.
I don't know who Max Power
Well, that's
is.
double meta. That's a character in The Simpsons. So a character within a character within The Simpsons.
Yeah. It was an episode when Homer Simpson changed his name to Max Power.
Okay, well that I would never have come up with that one. And I don't know that we should retire that slogan on this character. Because that's as meta as
there's
it
lots
gets.
of Simpsons characters to get through.
No.
Yeah, but wouldn't that be consistent with Simpsons kin? You'd have to say, but definitely not.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know.
Then you'd have to put your butt in every show.
Well, if someone is a kin of something, doesn't that mean that they are not actually that thing, but rather they feel a kinship towards it? On
Max
There you
Darrett, but definitely not Sideshow Bob if Sideshow Bob was in Family Guy, because then he'd have pink skin like a white man.
Wow, we are spurging kind of hard on this. So I'm going to move on. Our polecat punster and pussycat punisher, Hannah, Dr. Ranner McCam, Evil Panda, Puppet Master, and Rabid Long Range Rhetorician, and me, the Supreme Doge in charge, back in the sack. Yes, there's a sack joke there. We have an excellent show for you guys.
The sack
today.
has a left and a right, just like the brain has a left and a right. And you think you're not schizophrenic?
Yes, but the right left, and all that's left is the right. So, and I'm not lying. That's the truth. We have an excellent show for you guys today. We're going to be trying some new things out, so let's see how it goes, and feel free to give us feedback on this. We're going to be discussing a recent study that looks at how fatherlessness can actually affect a child's DNA. We're also going to be looking at what J.J. Abrams said regarding the feedback that Star Wars fans had for The Last Jedi. Here's a hint. It involves fragile masculinity and privilege. There's also an interesting story of a teacher who had sex with her 18-year-old student with the twist: the parents do not want to press charges on her. And lastly, we'll be looking at Iceland as they plan to be the first country to ban circumcision. Looks like they got more going on there than Bjork. Because when it comes to Iceland, the only thing I can think about is Bjork. It's like the only reference I have. And unfortunately, it's been a long time since Big Time Sexuality came out.
And that one American guy who shot himself in the face because of Bjork. It's not been a good run for us.
There was a guy that shot himself in the face for that?
Yeah, oh, that might just be. There was a guy who famously was a big fan of Bjork, and kept sending her messages and shit and recorded himself. He was one of the earliest sort of camcorder suicides because he shot himself in the back of the throat as one does.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, Mike. If you want to be disturbed, look up Bjork Stalker on Google.
Yeah,
very disturbing.
Wow. I mean, I think she's cute as a button in a kind of weird way. Like she looks like Faye or some shit. But I don't think that I would not self-harm for anybody.
It was Scandinavians who came up with the idea of the troll, by the way. I don't know if it's a coincidence that the Swedish are now leading the charge against the trolls they call men. But you know, they need to take out on Iceland. Iceland is like they're the Scandinavian country that doesn't give a fuck about Scandinavia. It's like, no, fuck you. We're an island off here. We don't give a fuck about any of you.
You know, speaking of trolls, that reminds me of our bonus story for the after show. So for our after show story, my wife sent me this link to a story on the Washington Post. It was called "A Former Russian Troll Speaks." It was like being in Orwell's world. That was the name of the article. I thought we got to read this. It's sure to scratch that red itch. So it's not like entirely related to men's issues, but I just wanted to, I thought it'd be an entertaining bit to read for the after show. So if you guys want to participate in our after shows, either as an audience member or a participant, please consider becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. And if you don't want to wake up one morning and find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the axe on our channel, go to badgerfeed.com. Badgerfeed.com is where you can find basically everything that we're doing and where it is. So, you know, we're kind of in a state where we might be on Twitch all the time. Who knows? It all depends on our future with YouTube. So it's better to just follow us directly through badgerfeed.com than maybe through the subscriptions, because who knows if you're getting notifications, if the subscriptions are showing all the videos we make, whatever. So it might be a good idea to do that. So now that we've gotten through that stuff, before I get into the stories, there was a bit of breaking news that I thought I would share, and I forgot to do a little write-up. I was going to do a write-up for this, but I didn't because it was too sudden, and I ended up having to do a stream with Allison just a little while ago. You may have seen it because it was just like a little while ago with Russell Brand and Jordan Peterson, the melding of the minds, as it were. But in other news, so Marvel Comics, you might have known about the whole this whole thing about how Marvel Comics has been essentially overrun by social justice warriors in the writing and as artists and everything. And people were really concerned with the future of the company because the books were crap and nobody was buying them. And the people who worked there, they just didn't care because they wanted to push their ideology forward and everything. Well, there was a hashtag that was started recently called Move the Needle. So you can look that up on Twitter. I don't know that this was entirely responsible for the shift, but there was a recent video that was put up on the Marvel Comics YouTube channel where essentially they're going to be doing a massive overhaul to every title that is currently out. A bunch of stuff is leaving, a bunch of new stuff is coming, and it looks like they're finally listening to the readers, and they're going to be making big changes. I've been paying a little bit of attention to this, and I saw the video that Marvel put out this morning, and I was very happy to see that it seems like they're going to be listening to their market and actually moving forward and making some changes away from this progressive identity politics oriented model that they were doing, which was not making them any money. So look into that.
I wonder if they do that or if they go in the other route and like, are you going to remake the Thor movies with a woman? Like recast Thor as fucking Whoopi Goldberg, and in the first movie he's trying to convince some earthling like Ryan Gosling, like, please fuck me, Ryan Gosling, and then Asgard will be safe. No, okay, they're gonna carry on doing new movies instead. Is that
Low-key, Loki, I want.
Have you even read any Loki?
No, but like I say low-key as an LOW hyphen KEY. But, you know, Loki, Thor, haha. I was going to say I do kind of want to see Whoopi Goldberg play Thor. That would be amazing.
Yeah, white woman's not good enough, son. You got to go all the way.
Sorry.
Yeah, but not just black woman, but black Jewish woman, which I think is only possible if you're Whoopi Goldberg.
Okay. So that's one bit of good news that I had to share about the whole Marvel business. It looks like they're, somebody's taking the wheel of the ship and they're starting to change direction away from the iceberg. Hopefully it's not too late. We'll see. So it's our job as consumers to essentially buy the comics we love and don't buy the ones we don't, and, make the market, essentially the market should decide the future of the company. So just keep that in mind. So now we're going to go ahead and get into the stories. This is going to be a little bit different. I hope that this will work out. All right, so first story. It's pretty interesting. Losing a father can impact your right. Losing a father can impact you right down to your DNA. Telomeres, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Telomeres are structures that act like caps on the ends of DNA strands, protecting our chromosomes from deterioration. Over many cell divisions, the telomere ends become shorter, and this shortening in their length has been associated with both aging and chronic stress. A study last year examined how father loss is associated with cellular function, as estimated by telomere length. Whether accelerated telomere erosion is just a biomarker of subsequent health effects or plays a casual role in producing health effects is not known at present. However, this study examining telomere length granted an early window at age 9 into adverse health effects that may not be realized for decades to come. So here's a bit from the study's abstract. Father loss was found to have a significant association with children's telomere length, with the death of a father showing the largest effect, which is a 16% reduction, followed by an incarceration, which is incarceration of the father, obviously, which is a 10% reduction, and divorce or separation, which is a 6% reduction. Effects are 40% greater for boys. So boys experience more of a reduction than girls do when the father is not around. Specifically, if this is a permanent thing, like if he dies. No differences were found by age at father loss or a child's race or ethnicity. So before I move on to the next quote, does anybody have any thoughts on what I've said so far?
So this isn't even to do with evolutionary genetics, well, except sort of through one sort of path. This is something that happens to a child's essentially genes, right, during their lifetime. It happens in real time, right?
Yeah.
Well, not genes, but telomeres. It's not quite the same as genes. It's something that affects affects the length of your life and the general quality of your life. And this is, ironically, where something that looks like genetic evolution is actually a result of, dare I say it, social engineering.
Yeah.
This is actually somewhere where socializing affects a person's biology. Now, is this something that the gender studies departments are looking into and trying to perhaps reverse the damage they've done? I'm going to go ahead and say no.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a soft no on that one, but Hannah?
Yeah, good luck getting them to do that. No, from the look of it, what this is basically saying is that losing their father, losing their relationship with their father, or losing their closeness to their father ages children. I imagine the same thing probably happens if you lose your mother or if you lose a sibling. But it affects boys more. It ages boys more when they lose their father than when girls lose theirs, which I would imagine has to do with losing your role model and the person you most expect to understand what you're going through as you grow up, because they experienced it when they were growing up.
It could also maybe explain, it could be connected to the fact that, when there's no father in the home, girls hit puberty a little earlier. They start menstruating a little earlier. They become sexually active earlier. I wonder if that's because you were saying that the alteration in telomeres causes is essentially like aging the children a little bit, right?
Well, actually that would be, you think about it from a girl's standpoint. While the father is still a role model, he's not a role model necessarily in terms of how to grow up and be a woman. He's a role model in how to grow up and be an adult, but he's also a role model in what to seek in a partner, right?
Absolutely.
So if there's no father in the home, the girl doesn't have the security that the father brings to the home. She might have other avenues of security, but she doesn't have that avenue of security. And biologically speaking, it's in her biological interest to seek that security, which would come from her husband. So she is going to be ready, become more biologically ready for a husband, a mate, a life mate, because she doesn't have the security of her father there. So your brain tells your body to do all kinds of things you don't know it's telling your body to do.
For millennials, a husband is a boyfriend whom you stick with.
Well, who you promise the state you're going to stick with anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Max, go ahead.
Yeah. I suppose this sort of thing should be obvious, although it's still surprising, like just the intensity of the results. But, you know, when it comes to the presence of a father, we know that the lack or inclusion of a father in particularly a child's life is a heavy determiner when it comes to their quality of life later on, whether they get involved in crime and stuff like that. Plus, you know, being a sexually dimorphic species and, you know, this, how much of us consider the family unit a sacred institution, I guess, for lack of a better word, in our lives. When you take away a part of that, obviously, I suppose it's going to affect us on the genetic level because, you know, when it comes to our genes, they're naturally influenced, but they're also influenced by our environment. Now, like, obviously, I think people here at Honey Badger Radio would be more inclined to say that it's a mixture of the two, whereas, like Mike pointed out, I don't think any of the social constructivists would be willing to admit that. But yeah, this is more great evidence to prove that it's definitely a mixture of the two.
Yeah, and it's always good to have the you know, studies like this so that we can point to them instead of just, you know, guessing willy-nilly how it works. So it's interesting to see that. But there's more information. So also,
hey, I'm going to interrupt for a second, Brian, because the chat has been saying you're coming through low.
I've been turning myself up. I was watching.
Oh, okay,
that.
okay.
So I think I might be a bit better now.
Okay.
All right. So continuing on, let me see here. I just gotta. Okay, yeah. So the next line, another thing from the article. Just so you know, no differences were found by age, depending on ethnicity. That has no effect on it, obviously. So another thing from the article: father loss. This is another quote. Due to the dissolution of the relationship between the parents, has its strongest effect through reducing family income. However, income played only a small role as a stressor when it came to death or incarceration of the father. The loss itself was a much more potent stress. So essentially they're saying is, you know, if the family income is affected, there's a little bit of a change there, but it has a lot more to do with whether or not the father is gone. So that has a much larger effect for, I guess, multiple reasons. Yeah, no shit.
Sure.
And one other point, another quote here. In an interview with one of the authors of the study, Daniel Notterman said, quote, "We conjecture that loss of a father due to death is a more potent stress because it completely ends the relationship between father and child. Like, they'll never see each other again. With separation and incarceration, however, it is still possible for there to be contact between father and child. Of course, that's only if the father still has visitation, or if the child, you know, gets to visit the father in prison, or if he's not in there for, you know, more than the rest of his life or whatever. But there's a chance. So it's a much more potent stress if the father is dead versus simply separated or incarcerated.
So I'll finish off the article. Quote, we think that our findings reinforce the growing understanding of a father's importance in the life of his children. Which was the same quote from Daniel Notterman. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's like after the First and Second World Wars, like when 2 generations of men in a row had lost their fathers to the war, then would have been a brilliant time to introduce some kind of movement that reinforced the bond between father and child.
Yeah.
Guess what we got instead? History. Guess what went ahead and happened instead? What do we get in the middle of the 20th century instead of a movement bringing fathers and children back together?
I don't know what you're talking about.
It's probably something to do with the liberalists.
It really percolates the pistachios. Yes. Yes.
And then when we do start trying to remedy it, when we do start fighting for a more balanced approach in family court, when families do break up, and a more balanced approach in society when people become parents but not a family, And that we get the goddamn feminists crusading against fatherhood by calling fathers deadbeats and abusers. What this shows, what all of the research that backs the importance of fatherhood in children's lives, the research that shows that children without fathers are much more likely to engage in criminal activity. They're more likely to engage in a lot of risky behaviors, including drug abuse, including promiscuity, including all kinds of difficulties in schools, social difficulties, and so on. All of these things that indicate it's important for kids to have both parents, that you can't cut out the father and the mother's just going to make up for all of that. That all we have is this movement that fights tooth and nail to prevent parents from having equal access to their children, in order to equally mentor their children, in order to equally support their children and provide equal care for their children and have equal relationships with their children. All we have is a child abuse movement. And I'm going to say it every single time. It is child abuse to cut your child's father out of his life. It is child abuse to cut your child's father out of her life. It is child abuse to deny your child the benefit of that relationship. Even if people don't care about fathers, which they should, because they're humans. But even if they don't, when you advocate, when feminists advocate to cut fathers out of children's lives, to support women who cut fathers out of children's lives, to limit fathers to being wallets in their children's lives, they are advocating for child abuse. They are pushing child abuse, and they are damaging society in ways that may be irreparable.
Yep.
How long are we going to let them do that?
Yeah, if you want to destroy the family, if you want to replace the family with whatever polyfiller the state has designed to replace the family, if you want to create Big Brother, basically, then the first step is to replace fathers, which may be what Orwell's dream was trying to tell Orwell when he called it Big Brother. The easiest, quickest way to replace the family with something else is through the father's role. You replace the father with the state.
The reason why you need a father around is because if you don't, then, like we've seen various times, what's been presented to us through many different examples with statistics, is that young kids, especially men, have no way to understand how to channel that masculine energy and to temper it when necessary, but also when to exert it. And when they don't have that guiding force, what you get a whole bunch of kids that are engaging in a lot of criminal behavior.
Yeah, and girls need fathers too, because as Peterson has said, you definitely need to help the masculine in men, but you also need to help the masculine in women, because women also have masculine qualities, right? So both are important. Obviously, this affects men more because they are men, and men are indeed masculine, but women also have masculine traits. And without a father, you don't know, you don't have something to model essentially ideal masculine behavior off of, and that means that, yes, the father should be an example, a positive example of masculinity to his children. And in order to do that, the mother has to make good choices as to who she chooses to sleep with. So, this is kind of both should be, there's an accountability cycle here. The women are responsible too, because they need to not use the fathers as wallets and essentially separate them from their children, because that's going to do damage, but also because for those that do want to, make whole families so that their children are more balanced individuals, they need to be good at selecting their mates, which also changes male behavior. It's like it keeps going out, right? As long as that happens like where women will only pick the best men that are going to father their children, and they honor that, and they don't abuse it, and they don't exploit those men, then other men will see that there's a benefit to that, and their behavior will also shift. And in one generation, you can make a world of difference.
You know, it's just occurred to me, the father kind of represents the role of the stranger. Because for most mammals, to even be they placental or sort of whatever they have in Australia, and I've forgotten the word, begins with M. But whatever kind of mother it is, you're sort of you sort of grow up thinking of the mother as the one you've always known as your own, the one who was there when you were born, the one who nurtured you with milk when you were young. And at some point, you learn to respect the father, who is the other, because as biologically, as far as you're concerned, he hasn't supplied milk, he hasn't spat you out of himself. He's just this guy who, for some reason, you're meant to show respect to, and it's that some reason that kind of relates to collectivism in a way. I know it's sort of we've not just instinctively but learnedly come to think of women as the collectivists and men as the individualists. But the ability to see a father as something just as important as a mother requires a certain form of not just traditionalist, but biological sort of respect that you don't get from individualism. It's kind of, you have to be told that this guy is just as important as your mother.
Yeah,
it has to be explained to you intellectually that this guy had just as much importance in creating you as your mother. And that's beyond individualism. It's a testament to humankind and its harnessing of collectivism as well as individualism. Because it's unusual for animals to see their fathers as part of themselves. Their mothers, yes, depending on whether, because reptiles or whatever, like I have mothers or fathers at all. Just fuck you. I'm just going to kill things and eat things. But mammals, for the most part, know their mothers but don't know their fathers. Their fathers, like bears or whatever, just wander off and keep on killing things. But we're an unusual species where the father is part of our psychological makeup.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I guess you could say it's your first lesson in community.
Yeah.
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 There's the other thing that I want to add with the talk about fathers being a guide for masculinity in girls. The masculinity of your father as a girl growing up, the masculinity of your father is also a guide for your femininity. And I didn't really think of it that way until the day that I realized that part of the reason that I love my husband the way I do is because he's someone in front of whom I would be embarrassed to be an asshole. And like, I don't know how to explain this without citing that stupid movie with Jack Nicholson and Helen Hunt, where he tells her she makes him want to be a better man, but he fucks up how he says it first and starts talking about his medicine. The thing is, when someone, just the way you feel about someone's opinion of you challenges you to strive to be a better person, and when someone draws out the best in you like that, it's a vital thing in your life. And it wasn't something that I got because my mother told me I should look for this. It wasn't even something that I can honestly say that my mother exemplified in a way that I could have gathered it from watching and being at home and everything. It was what my father exemplified. And it was, Dad wouldn't have married a woman who was willing to be an asshole in front of him. And learning the way that my father was mindful of what kind of partnership he was getting himself into, because he knew he wanted to be a father and he knew he wanted the best for his children when he was dating. And he rejected women who, and he rejected a lot of women. He rejected women who were not going to be partners to him that he felt would be the best partner with whom to raise children. That shaped me as a girl growing up, knowing that someday I would be the counterpart to a father in a relationship. It took a long time for it to manifest, because I went through an idiot period, like an absolute idiot period. But it was something that I did arrive at because of my father. And it's not that my mother didn't contribute to that, but she would not have achieved it without my father.
It's a bit like the grandma thing. Like, you try not to be a certain kind of offensive person in front of your grandma, but there's also another kind of person you try not to be in front of your granddad, and it's a little bit different, isn't it? It's you're trying not to be offensive in front of your grandma, but you're trying not to be... I don't know. What is it in front of your grandfather? I don't know.
Yeah, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you try not to be a dumbass in front of your grandfather.
Yeah. I just wanted to say something slightly off topic, but also it's still slightly on topic. You brought up that movie featuring Jack Nicholson and Helen Hunt. It's called As Good as It Gets. And one of my all-time favorite lines from any movie was in that movie. Jack Nicholson plays a novelist, and one of his fans comes up to him. She's a female fan, and she's absolutely just struck by him. And she says, "How do you write women so well?" And then Jack Nicholson just says, it's so wrong, but he also said it so well. He says, "I think of a man, and I take away reason and accountability."
Yeah,
he's not wrong. I wish he was. I wish that was wrong.
No, I mean, like,
right the way women are in society, that's not wrong.
I'm sorry. I'm saying it's so wrong because it's so politically incorrect. But
well, there is that. But yeah, you're right, and it's not wrong. It's something, though. If we want our society to move forward, if we want to get to a place where we don't have the scope of problems that we have today in society that are social based, if we want a real war on poverty, then what we need to do is start a war on lack of accountability in women. We have a war on lack of accountability in men, but we can't change accountability in men without changing accountability in women. And the fact is, men are already better at accountability. Men are already forced by society to be better at accountability. If we brought women up to that level, we could end a large amount of the cycle of poverty that we have today. Never going to get rid of poverty entirely, because it's always going to be the bottom of the financial food chain, and the financial food chain is never going to be a straight line across where everybody has the same amount of stuff, because everybody doesn't have the same amount of motivation or skill or talent and all that. But we don't have to have a situation where it is inescapable. And we don't have to have a situation where it is so inescapable for so many people that we end up with a cycle like we have today. But like I said, that is going to rely on bringing female accountability to the level that male accountability is now.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And for more on that, you should watch the Accountability Gap series on HBR Talk.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next story because we have a few more to get through. You might find this one to be kind of fun, where it's a little less serious. I wouldn't say that the story about DNA in children being changed by missing fathers is a bad or like a somber story, but it is kind of sobering for people who may not know. But this one is a little bit more, let's say, laid back. So, J.J. Abrams shares opinion on Last Jedi fan reception. Before we even go into this, I haven't seen the movie, so I don't have any input as far as that goes. This isn't really about the content of the movie itself. It's more about his reaction to the perceived fan reception. So, according to J.J. Abrams, Star Wars fans did not like Star Wars The Last Jedi. The people who didn't like it, well, they just couldn't handle women in leading roles. Herp-de-derp. J.J. Abrams he was interviewed by IndieWire. He offered some insight into why he thinks that there was a lukewarm, get the pun there, response to The Last Jedi. Abrams will be given an award soon at the Athena Film Festival. Get this, I didn't even know this thing existed, okay? He's getting an award at the Athena Film Festival known as the Leading Man Award, which is an award given to, quote, men in Hollywood who have a strong track record for serving as vocal allies of and effective advocates for women in entertainment.
That's gonna go to the Black Panther guy next. Coogler, I think is his name. Definitely. I mean, he directed that movie. What? I mean, that's black people are the same as women. Shut up.
So it's basically a knight in shining armor award.
Yeah.
From a group that is apparently not so much fighting for female independence as for handouts from men. It sounds like.
And I wonder if at any point the Leading Men Award is going to clash with the Me Too movement in any scandalous way, perhaps.
I might want to look back and see who past recipients of that reward are and compare it against the Me Too list.
Pretty hilarious, if you ask me. Oh,
I don't want to get into that series of slippery slopes though, where everyone we've given an award to has probably abused their power as a respected member of the artistic community. Because yeah, that's causal rather than correlational. Much like the South Park sketch. If you take a male chimp and give him a shitload of cash, he'll start throwing it around and fucking female chimps. Yes, that's what tends to happen.
I got some super chats I want to read. I meant to do this. First of all, there was on the last stream I did, there were a couple I didn't get to. And I want to apologize to the people who donated on the stream that just ended. Just before this one, I just had to run because I had to get this one started. So I'm going to read them, but there's really nothing to respond to because there's no context. So Foiled Edify, I guess, gave us 20 Donkey Kong coins and wrote, "Ook ook throws barrel." Get it? Because it's Donkey Kong coins. Thank you, Foiled. Rambam 3000 gave us £5 and says, "Here's a donation to help out with the court case." Thank you very much. French Honey Badger gave us $5 and says, "Virgin Mary is very strong in Catholicism and Latin America is heavily Catholic." He also gives us another $5 and continues, "Also, Canada and the UK are Protestants, not as strong into Catholicism and the Virgin Mary, hence why they would ignore her." And then Aporiak, I think I'm pronouncing that right, gave us £10 and writes, "Jordan is trying to induce Brand into adulthood in the manner of the benevolent father." And that's related to the stream that we just did a little while ago, where we just discussed a podcast where Russell Brand was interviewing Jordan Peterson, and it is about as dumb as it sounds, at least half of it. And then, yeah, I know.
Just, I'll work on that syllable later.
And then French Honey Badger gave us $10 just a little while ago and said, "That quote from Nicholson is probably the result of the red pill narrative sneaking in and is being portrayed as horrible to build up to the resolution of the film." Which
the red pill narrative has, I mean, from that description and from what we think of artists and especially comedians over the decades, they've always been a little bit red pill. I mean, no one ever needed to tell Bill Burr any of this stuff in order for him to do any of these routines.
Mm-hmm. Or a lot. There's a lot. Go ahead.
This stuff has always been in the artistic eye of the men in the artistic, dare I say, community. But the point is, it never comes out politically. It's never quite translated into, hey, this is actually real. We should do something about this.
There is a deer of the teal persuasion in the chat. What's up, stranger? I just wanted to holler at Teal Deer real quick. All right. Michael Keller gives us 5 CHF. I'm not sure what that is. Thank you, Michael. And he's also our resident audiophile. He knows exactly when I'm too low, and doesn't have a problem telling me, and I appreciate that. So I hope that I'm sounding okay. Michael Keller writes, J.J. Abrams should make room for a black female director-producer if he believes that people of color and women's are underrepresented. Yes, he should not direct the third movie and just give it to whatever black, disabled, trans, bisexual, gender fluid woman of color that wants to direct.
Spike Jonze is thinking of having a sex change and becoming disabled. Or if not, I'll sort it out for him. Let's just remove that and remove this Spike. Then you'll be the president of the progressive United States.
Oh, it's they're Swiss francs. So that's what he gave us. Swiss francs. I don't think we've ever gotten Swiss francs before. That's cool. Thanks, man.
They don't sound like a joke. Sorry.
No.
Keep giving us the sex and the Donkey Kong coins.
Yeah, I don't know if I can. The chefs. Oh, we can call them chefs since they're CHF. And they're Swiss. Oh, wait, they're not Swedish, though. Darn it. Bork, bork, bork. Okay, so let's move on with the rest of this article. All right, here's a quote from J.J. Abrams. If you are someone who feels threatened by women and needs to lash out against them, you can probably find an enemy in Star Wars. You can probably look at the first movie that George Lucas did, Star Wars A New Hope, and say that Leia was too outspoken or she was too tough. Anyone who wants to find a problem with anything can find the problem. The internet seems to be made for that, end quote. Well, I don't think people have a problem with women in films. Just outright, that's not the problem. You're misidentifying the problem. The problem comes with how they are written and the ideology that backs them up, because it makes for shitty products. Plus, people are afraid that you're going to kill the franchise, and it looks like you're going to kill the franchise with these bad movies that nobody likes.
People aren't too thrilled by tokenism in film either, and they're not too thrilled by the narrative on women in film being exploited as a cover-up for bad writing. Like, women are not like this sponge you can use to soak up all of the criticism of your bad writing or your bad directing or your bad production or whatever, and say, well, you just don't like it because there are women. No. People are allowed to not like things about a film that has a woman in it without being accused of not liking those things because the woman is there. It's a bullshit narrative, and nobody likes to be bullshit.
Yeah, the reason people like Princess Leia is it was the trope of the princess trapped by the bad guy, but she turned out to defy that trope. She broke that trope by being a badass in her own right. She knows how to shoot. She knows how to fucking negotiate and shit. Which, in terms of Greek patriarchy, being a senator is very much a negation of the trope. But in the new ones with Rey and shit, I mean, she's in the role of Luke Skywalker, and she's also breaking that role by being more powerful than that. And that's not the point. Being you know the princess in danger, but being more powerful than that is a good way of breaking a trope. But being the hero who learns how to be great, taking that trope and breaking it so you're the hero who is already great for no earthly reason, that's breaking storytelling. You're not just breaking a trope. You're just breaking the entire mold in which it lives.
Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, okay. So this is the point in the show where I get everybody pissed off at me. Listen, I got to be careful as to how I say what I'm about to say. Okay, so
it's whenever okay. It comes, don't worry about it. Just say it, and we'll hash it out.
Yeah, no, it's just people seem like the last couple of days, people have been accusing me of being a leftist feminist, even though I'm not. Feminism is cancer, but anyways.
Okay.
So most of the time, whenever somebody in Hollywood says that somebody doesn't like something, it's because they don't like, they're misogynist or they're racist or they hate social justice. I fall on the side of the people that are criticizing the filmmakers, obviously. I was a big supporter of Gamergate, you know, when they were all saying that all the people that were criticizing Zoe Quinn and people like that were a bunch of misogynists. Obviously, I fell on the side of the gamers. This is the only scenario that I can think of where J.J. Abrams actually has a leg to stand on here. Not much of a leg, but he does have a leg. And here's what I mean. I know that Hannah and Brian haven't seen The Last Jedi. What I have seen, and since that movie has come out on more than one occasion, is a bunch of people saying that because there are several lead female characters in this movie, that the movie somehow has a social justice warrior agenda. And I don't know, it might just be because it's fully possible that it might be because I'm autistic and these sometimes things that are obvious to other people aren't obvious to me. But that's ridiculous to say that just because there's a lot of lead female characters in the movie and, you know, all the other male characters are somehow demonized, which I didn't see at all, that makes it have a social justice warrior feminist agenda. I don't think that's true, and I think that's ridiculous. And I'm only defending J.J. Abrams on this point because I've seen a lot of people on the internet, people within my circles, people within our circles say that. Now, it could be the case that there is an agenda. I'm looking at the comments on the YouTube video, like on the YouTube live stream right now. I want you guys to put in your comments there so you can sort of explain it to me. And I will look at the comments on the pre-recorded version of this later.
Sure.
Please explain it to me because I don't understand. But aside from that, yeah, generally, whenever somebody says that people don't like a movie because they're racist, sexist, misogynist, that's ridiculous. People can dislike a movie without that being the case.
Yeah.
But in this case, I have seen a lot of people criticize The Last Jedi for a bullshit reason like that.
Okay. Well, let me.
I've been.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna point out that you may be seeing what people are saying differently than what they actually are saying there, because there's people that have been saying that putting women in roles for no other reason than to put women in those roles is a social justice warrior agenda. And that's been said about more than just Star Wars. And there's people that have been complaining that Rey is a Mary Sue and that she doesn't have the type of character development that some of the other male characters have had, and so on. And that there have been changes made to the basically the canon of the story to accommodate this. And those are all valid complaints, and they are very often getting folded down in by critics of the complainers. They're getting folded down into, you're complaining because there's a woman in this role. They're not complaining because she's female. They're complaining because the character had to be changed in ways that it shouldn't have had to be changed in order to stuff a woman into it. There's no reason to make the character a Mary Sue just because the character is female. And then, you know, there's no reason. And the other thing that a lot of us complained about, because I complained about this, they started the people don't like this movie because of the female characters narrative before the movie came out. They started it before people knew who all the characters were going to be. They did the same thing with Ghostbusters. They did the same thing with everything that they have shoved characters into, or shoved women into characters that had previously been, you know, male characters, or that would previously have been expected to be a male character, or that they interpret it as people will expect this to be a male character. They did that with every single one of those, and it isn't a complaint about the gender of the character. It is a complaint about all of the things surrounding the gender of the character that were unnecessary and that were agenda based.
Or at least the ideology informs those decisions, the storytelling decisions, right? Like if you're writing the story and you have a feminist mindset while you're writing it, then you might make decisions about the narrative that are not good writing decisions, but they're good for feminism. So you might say, well, we want how are we gonna write Rey? Like I can only go off of Force Awakens because I didn't see the second one. Okay, well they were like, well, we can't have anything bad happen to her. Like we can't have her get hurt. We can't have her experience, any like actual trauma. We also don't want her to have any flaws because we don't want to be misogynistic. So and that's how you get Mary Sue's, because this mindset informs your writing decisions, and then you want to like it changes the way you approach writing the story. Now again, I'm not saying people shouldn't be allowed to do that. That you do whatever you want. I believe in absolute freedom to write whatever stories you want to write. But I think that an ideology can inform or can sort of influence someone when they're creating something. Now, and somebody in the chat said, I don't have the exact quote, but somebody in the chat asked, Mallory Reed, I believe, she said, why are the Badgers dealing with this kind of like, pop culture topic, like they thought that we're too smart for that, and I appreciate the compliment. I think that culture is important though, and I think that it's worth discussing, but I think that this particular topic I'm bringing up because the people in Hollywood have a lot of influence, they have a very large platform, and they can make sweeping allegations. So when J.J. Abrams essentially calls the Star Wars fan base sexist, we should respond to that, and we should make a comment on that, because that is a fan base that is comprised mostly of men, and it is a blanket statement that doesn't have a lot of validity. Plus, it's a straw man argument, because the majority of the criticism that I've seen towards The Last Jedi doesn't have a lot to do with gender, and it's mostly about how it essentially took a giant dump on the entire legacy of the franchise. Not only the previous films, but even the film that just came before it, that was supposed to be the film that leads, like the one that's supposed to lead into the other, essentially becomes irrelevant, or at least less relevant in many ways, according to the people who talked about it. I don't know, because I haven't seen it myself, but if what they're saying is right, it sounds like something worth bitching about. And besides, why can't people bitch about the things that they're passionate about, because they were hoping for something better? They were hoping for a better product. So I think it's worth responding to.
Well, perhaps we could refer to the political correspondent among the honey badgers, the people we have around here who are experts on economics and politics. Oh wait, we're all artists.
Yes,
we're all artists.
We're all either photographers or people who draw cartoons or people who appear as certain things or create appearances as certain things.
Mike,
none of us have ever pretended to be experts on the intelligent things, unless you count art as an intelligent thing. We're artists. We only go as far into this as we feel we're able to, which isn't nowhere and isn't everywhere either.
Well, for me personally, I am an expert in economics and politics. I am supreme leader of Springfield, the Simpson ethno state. So just letting you know that.
That's why we never found it. It's hidden by a force field that creates a holographic illusion of like some like cornfield, right? Is that what it is? It's
like maybe a dome?
Yeah.
Are you referring to a dome?
Yes.
Yeah, the Doge is right, because think of it. What state is Springfield in?
Springfield,
nobody knows. You can't find it.
Springfield is the Wakanda of America. That's basically
there
what
we go.
Is. Yeah,
that's right.
I want to point something else on this topic, though. And this I'm going to take us back to 1988. There was this film that came out. Now, for the longest time, feminists had pushed for the idea that a woman's sexual history and a woman's sexual behavior is entirely irrelevant when she's involved in a rape case, and there's an argument to be had there. There are aspects of a woman's sexual history that are irrelevant to arguments that get made in rape cases, like wearing a miniskirt isn't consent, right? That's a valid argument, but at the other end of it, we end up in this discussion where feminists have now gotten laws passed that you can't talk about anything related to a woman's sexual history or behavior in a rape case. So if a woman says, I left bite marks, that proves that I was fighting tooth and nail to get away, and this was a rape, and it turns out she bites when she's excited, and she has 7 ex-boyfriends who will come into court and testify that bite marks are not actually indicative of a fight. You can't get them to come in and testify because that's her sexual behavior, and it's slut shaming and all of that. Well, that narrative really didn't play well with the public. The public didn't adopt this idea that all history, all behavior that a woman engages in is irrelevant in a rape case until after the movie The Accused came out, and with its brutal rape scene involving Jodie Foster and a bunch of men in, if I remember right, in a bar on top of a pinball game. It might have been in an arcade, but I'm pretty sure it was a bar and on top of a pinball game. And the movie was about, prosecuting, bringing all of the perpetrators of the rape and the people that cheered them on to justice. And it pushed that narrative that that there is nothing a woman does that is relevant, not just that makes rape okay, but that is even relevant in a rape case. And the first, nothing makes rape okay. The second, no, there are things that can be relevant to bring up in a rape case. Now, what does that have to do with this? Hollywood movies, television shows, popular books, pop culture are ways in which the artists of society, the writers of society, the entertainers of society put things into the public narrative. This is how you get people to adopt ideas. This is how you slide things under the radar, or you raise awareness, depending on what you're trying to do. And the line between propaganda and insightful literature or insightful entertainment is very thin. And that's why we do have to talk about stuff like this. The public has to be able to criticize all forms of entertainment, all forms of media, all forms of communication. Nothing can be sacred. Nothing can be above criticism. Not even your holy books. Not even the best movies ever made. Not even the greatest things ever said and the greatest people ever known. Nothing can be above criticism. And when we see in pop culture, you just don't like women. You don't want women involved in this. Women, women, women. Let's make women our shield against this criticism. It is vital as gender issues advocates that we discuss this, unless we want the accused after the accused after the accused to come through and break down all of the tools we have in our society to protect ourselves against authoritarian power being sold to us by snake oil salesmen in popular media.
Often we sort of, I sort of worry that this is not just going to bring about the end of human civilization, but the end of the human race. And there'll be no record at all for any aliens who come here that this is what happened to the human race. We all decided to do whatever women say, and that killed us all because we were all too afraid to say it. But stuff like what I'm going to call the Ghostbusters fucking paradox. It's not even a paradox. The Ghostbusters situation. I mean, we remember the time of the civil rights movement and when we got over Jim Crow, right?
Yeah.
And despite the fact that history was making it difficult, all of the people in charge of writing the history books would rather, at the time, would rather have gone along with Jim Crow and say, well, these black people are just, they're privileged. They're trying to capitalize on their privilege. But we remember, nevertheless, because of the stands that were made. And the idea that this period isn't going to be remembered centuries from now, in light of that, is kind of absurd, because not only will we have all the articles that have been written about just shameless hatred of men. I mean, we here at Honey Badger Radio are here catalog many of these articles because we read articles from 1,000 years ago about how we believe in democracy, but black people will never be part of. I mean, even Abraham Lincoln said shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
But people are going to look back on periods like this and not only see the articles that were written, but also see movies like Ghostbusters, and also see all kinds of movies where they tried to replace men with women. And we look back on how we got over civil rights and Jim Crow, and we remember that. How are we possibly not going to remember this? Not only did it take over the articles in the local newspapers, it took over the goddamn movies, and not just the independent movies, the ones that were being played in the fucking Disney arenas that only Disney owned.
Mm-hmm.
Even movies were being taken over and said, look, these are women, they're better than men. And by the way, we should carry on mutilating them or you hate Jews.
Of course.
That was a reference to the Iceland story.
Okay, so Max had to jet, so he's no longer with us. R.I.P. Max. Here I'll just take him out. Bang. And
have fun being yellow.
And so yeah, he had to leave, but he wanted to say that Teal Deer, who is in the chat, he linked a series of videos on the Last Jedi. The YouTube channel, if you want to watch it, is called Mauler, capital M-A-U, capital L-E-R. And apparently he's done a series of videos. So if that's something you're interested in, you go check it out after this stream is over. Meanwhile, let me read a super chat. Cyberzerk sent us 50 secs. And he says, what was that movie again that everybody likes and nobody dislikes, even feminists? Oh, yeah, Deep Throat. That was a good movie for what it does.
Well, the story of Julian Assange was a great movie until he started telling us what we didn't want to hear. And then he became the villain instead of the hero. It's funny how that was.
All right.
I got to say, that was the perfect super chat to pay for it with sex.
That's true. That was it. The sex joke was in the original super chat. We didn't have to make it.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I also want to point out, and it sort of to add to what Mike said.
Mm-hmm.
Shakespeare, in his day, Shakespeare was pop culture. Shakespeare was the pop culture artist of his day, the pop culture writer of his day. You could even refer to him as kind of the McDonald's of playwriting, like Stephen King referred to himself as the McDonald's of horror novel writing. He was popular in terms of in many different terms, but when they teach Shakespeare in school, to young students, one of the things they have to do is go through and explain the fact that he laced his plays with puns and other forms of basic humor in order to prevent the people in the cheap seats from pelting the actors with raw and rotten vegetables. So he drew enough of a crowd that people who had to be careful where they spent their money spent it coming to see his work. And today we remember Shakespeare today as one of the greats. That this is classic. This is something that everybody learns in school as a basic thing that we all have to know. That it is studied. The style is studied. The storytelling style is studied. The character tropes are studied. The plays themselves are memorized and put on at schools all over the place. There's movies made from them today. It'd be like 150 years from now, doing the same thing with something like the Harry Potter series or something like Stephen King's work. Actually, more like Hitchcock. If you went through and did this with Hitchcock's work, and you had to have every student that goes through literature class had to study Hitchcock, that would be very similar. And yeah, the influence that is there is long-term and compelling. And it will be compelling for the long term.
So Shakespeare was the Michael Bay of playwrights.
Oh, they're going to ban Lady Macbeth at one point because it's misogynistic.
Oh yeah.
You can't portray women as having this much agency. How dare you?
I don't know. They might.
You
They
joke,
might.
but I see it happening. I see it.
They might just decide to wash their hands of all of it by then.
All right, so I'm gonna finish this story with a Star Wars story.
Clearly, I should stick to puns.
There's some super chats. Was that a joke? Michael. Oh no, I already read that one. Cyberzerk, I already read that one too. So okay, I guess I'm caught up on those. Okay, never mind. In response to Blacklist founder Franklin Leonard, who sent a tweet back in October 2015 saying, "When you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression," Abrams said, "We're not asking to take away the male point of view or male artistry or male contributions. We're simply saying, what is fair? I can see why people might get freaked out by it, but the people who are getting freaked out are the people who are accustomed to that privilege. And this is not oppression. This is about fairness." Well, he's really gunning to get that Athena Film Festival award for the men in Hollywood who have a strong track record of serving as vocal allies of and effective advocates for women in entertainment. Really.
And will totally not get accused of a heinous crime anytime soon.
Yes, hopefully
And he
not.
couldn't be more insulting if he was trying to be insulting on purpose. Because what he basically just said was, we are engaging in tokenism because women can't get these things on their own. We're not asking to take away the male point of view or male artistry or male contribution. We're simply saying what is fair. Why would anyone consider it fair to put women artificially into positions that they are not already in? And without any merit, without great writing, without the character having evolved in some way or another in the writer's but no, we start from it must be female, not we start from it must be a great Jedi for this reason, or it must accomplish these things. The character must have these qualities, and character qualities. No, female first. And then because the character is female, you have all these limitations placed on what you can subject a character to, and so on from there. That's not fairness. It's not pushing women forward. It's not helping women. It's not doing anything for women. Whether it's doing anything to men or not, whether he thinks it's doing anything to men or not, he's not achieving what he thinks he's achieving with this. He's being insulting to both sexes and degrading to women.
Yeah.
And they're giving him an award for it.
Because that's what they do. Right?
The way people have kept each other in line for quite a long time now is peasants are kept in line by the noblemen, noblemen are kept in line by the king, and the king is kept in line by stories people tell about the king. And this is how it comes back to Shakespeare. If you want, you don't have pyramids anymore. You can't build a big fucking stone triangle in the sand anymore. If you want your name to be remembered well, then you have to be remembered well in the eyes of the playwrights, such as Shakespeare. And that's what finally completes the circuit. The problem with that old system was assuming that kings are appointed by God. And kings answer to no one but God, but they don't. They answer to artists like Shakespeare. No matter how noble a king appears in a tragedy, he will always answer to the people writing the tragedy. But now we've broken this. Now that we have the Mary Sue, you can just write a female part, and that female part answers to no one. You can create a mythical female, and there is no critic, no playwright even, who can do a play about that play, who can reasonably say, hang on, let's develop this a little bit. Because you can't develop it anymore. They're not just chosen by God, they're chosen by, the human MacGuffin, shall we say, which, as I pointed out in one of my videos, is sometimes the Aryan bloodline, sometimes the workers' union, sometimes the trans people. but always women.
Yep. The whammons. Redicus gives us $5 and writes, feminism equals gender communism. Remember, socialism always ends in starvation and genocide. Thank you, Redicus, for your donation. Now, if there's nothing else, we're going to move on to the last story. Thank you, J.J. Abrams, for that pointless statement. I hope that you get all of the virtues that your signaling is requesting. A student teacher at Conard High School, based in Hartford, Connecticut, has been charged with 3 counts of second-degree sexual assault concerning one of her students. The 21-year-old woman named Taylor Boncal turned herself into the police after an anonymous student reported the relationship to the school principal. She didn't turn herself in on account of this anonymous report. Rather, it was because she expressed concern for the victim and was worried that he would get into trouble. The twist in this story is the fact that the student was 18 years old and that he was the one who pursued the teacher. The two began exchanging text messages on December 13th, 2017, and their first sexual encounter was on Christmas Day. And that's not all. The female student's parents specifically asked that Miss Boncal not be prosecuted. While Boncal has been fired from her position, obviously, the actual crime here has yet to be determined. The one that seems most logical in this scenario is that Miss Boncal abused her position of power. Aside from that, let us discuss what other crimes there may be. By the way, slightly off topic, the name of the high school is Conard High School. In French, Conard means asshole. Not related, but kind of a funny little thing. So that's that story. There isn't much in the way of quotes that we have pulled because Max, who wrote up this summary, thank you, Max, he didn't really do it from the perspective of quoting so that we could use the PowerPoint, but we can still discuss it in the abstract. So do you guys have any thoughts on this? Now, I know this isn't...
It's difficult, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
it's 18 and 21.
Yes.
This is where it gets difficult. I mean, obviously there's a point where it gets easy, but there's a grey area, and this I think is towards the other end of the grey area, isn't it? An 18 and a 20. Obviously, there's the abuse of power, and that's where it all comes down to.
Yeah.
But this isn't pedophilia. It's not even ebophilia.
No.
Yeah.
No, it's an inappropriate relationship in the context of the teacher is an authority figure over the student. And yeah, students do hit on teachers. Both sexes of students do this. And it's one of the reasons that male teachers make a point to not be alone with their female students. This is a self-defense thing. Female teachers need to do the same thing. And it's normal for a teenager to develop a crush on a mentor. It is not healthy for the mentor to turn that crush into a sexual relationship. And it's dangerous to the person being mentored when you do that. And one of the things that I can liken this to, because people talk about this like it's a situation outside of the workplace, and it's not. Yeah, the kid was an adult. Legally he's an adult. And yeah, the age difference is not a problem. If this was two people who met in a bar, nobody in their right mind would argue that there was a crime committed. But it's not two people who met in a bar. It's two people in a school. I used to work in nursing homes. I was a nurse's aide until I was injured in a way that I can't lift people anymore on a regular basis. So I can't do it anymore. But when I did, I took care of people with varying degrees of mental incapacitation and people who were there because they had physical handicaps and could no longer take care of themselves in their own homes, but mentally they were just fine. They didn't need anybody to advocate for them mentally. They didn't need anybody to be responsible for their decision making. They just needed somebody there to take physical care of bodies that weren't working the way they did when they were in their 30s. And I got hit on because when you're 65, a 20-year-old is cute. A 25-year-old is incredibly cute. And this is not, it's not unusual or abnormal for somebody to develop a crush on a care provider either. But as a person who was responsible for the safety and welfare of the people I was providing care for, even a person who was completely competent to make his own relationship decisions would be considered a victim had I acted on any of their hitting on me. Had I actually taken advantage of that and engaged in a relationship with somebody, I would have been seen as exploiting the individual. And it would have been illegal, and I could have gone to jail for it. That was not the only thing that stopped me, but it still, if it is the only thing that stops the individual, should stop the individual. Whether the individual works in a nursing home or hospital or school or any other area where someone's welfare is dependent on the individual, and someone's mentoring is dependent on the individual. And as far as this goes, I understand why the parents may not think there need to be charges pressed. I understand why people might turn around and say this is ridiculous, this was not a child, this was not pedophilia, this was not even hebephilia. But this line can't be erased. Not if you want to maintain the safety of the students. Not if you want to maintain the psychological welfare of the students. And not if you want to maintain the integrity of the student-teacher relationship. It must not be erased. This line must not be erased. And that is ethics.
Yeah, it's a bit like being a psychologist. No matter what age you are as a psychologist, you can't fraternize with a patient of any age, regardless of what any age they are or you are, or you're taking advantage of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, technically, she was a student teacher, which I think means she's like a teacher's aide. But that doesn't. I mean, if it was
it doesn't change anything.
No, it doesn't change anything. It's about professionalism and maintaining your professional decorum. So, initially when I heard the way that the original article was written was a little clickbaity because it was like 21-year-old teacher has sex with her student, parents don't press charges, and I was like, what the fuck? But I think that obviously that there's probably a lot of logic behind it. I mean, she turned herself in because she didn't want the student that she had slept with to get in trouble. But they're not pressing charges, or at least they don't want to. I don't really know what's going to happen with that. But I do think that it was very unprofessional. It was a bad idea. And it's just not a line that we should cross, even if it is difficult, even if it appears to be blurry. If you want to, be involved with this guy, and you should probably not be involved with his classes, So at the very least, try to work something out. But yeah, that's basically the story. I don't know what else to add. I guess we can move on from here. But what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I was under the impression that the French word con, C-O-N, meant cunt. Or is that cool? No, cool is asshole. Wait, that might just be a slang word. C-U-L, cool, I think.
Cool.
Is asshole.
I don't know.
Con.
Con
is cunt. I think that's where we get the word cunt from, the French word con, meaning cunt.
All right.
It's difficult to tell where language goes once it's in this kind of pig's will, shall we say?
Yeah.
I will say one last thing on this.
Go ahead.
In the past, there have been times, and there were environments under which there were age limits. You had to be a certain age to become a teacher in some cultures, and this type of thing might have been why. And it'd be one thing to say, well, you're going to be an elementary school teacher. Yeah, I don't think an age change would be necessary for this reason, for something like that. But maybe we ought to start re-examining whether or not. I mean, we have an age limit for drinking alcohol. We have an age limit for buying guns. We have an age limit for voting. We have age limits for different things. You have an age limit for driving a car. Maybe there ought to be a minimum age for being alone in charge of a classroom full of other people's kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one that normally likes to encourage government regulation for this, but since for anything really, but since the government mandates that students sit their asses in the classroom and be subject to the control of the teacher, then maybe that mandate ought to include a minimum age. And maybe that minimum age ought to be just high enough that the individual has had time to work in some other job before they got their teaching degree, long enough to develop some maturity. And maybe they ought to have something else that they have to do first. And I hate to argue that, but there's news story after news story after news story coming out of women having sex with their students in high school settings and junior high school settings. And it's very clear that the women doing it don't seem to think they're doing anything wrong, even after all of the education they get that tells them it is. So obviously maturity is the problem. They haven't developed the maturity to figure out that just because they're short-sighted doesn't mean that something that they've been told is wrong isn't wrong.
Yeah.
You know, in the late 70s, sort of early 80s sort of period, the left-wing ideal was very much the Pink Floyd sort of thing, of the schoolmaster with the motorbike, like, don't you do that, laddie, sort of thing. And the whole you don't need no education thing was a pushback against that. Like, stop being so unencumbered with children when you're trying to teach children things. We don't want any of these strict ass schoolmasters anymore because they're mistreating the children. And ever since then, we've been sort of going, yeah, that's a good point. We should probably move in a different direction to that sort of thing. And we can't really pinpoint the moment where we went too far. But I think we've gone too far, haven't we? Away from the harsh-ass schoolmaster and towards the people who just love children. We just love them. Really.
Just love them. All right, so I got some super chats from the other channel for our other stream. Leaf Ma Leaf. I just want to make sure I read that right. Gave us 20 knocks and wrote Jeg Elsker. Brian, I don't know what that is. Jeg Elsker. It seems like another language. And then he gave us another 20 knocks and wrote, sorry, hold on. Hey, why did not Allison read my super snap? I think he means super chat. And Allison's not in here. Yeah, I'm reading it now. It's just that it's on another stream.
Norwegian? Nox? Everything sounds Scandinavian now, but Nox could be Norwegian.
Yeah, likely. And then we also have a $5 super chat from French Honey Badger where he says, cool. I'm not going to pronounce it right. The L is not pronounced. Cool. Con equals, so cool equals asterisk SS. I don't know what that is. Oh, ass, I guess. And con equals stupid, also cunt, but it's not derogatory in that way. And then conard equals dumbass. So there you go.
That's the translation I read. The translation I read translated con into cunt because the English consider a cunt to merely be a stupid person.
Mm-hmm. And Michael Keller explains...
Much like a dick is merely a disagreeable person.
Right. And Michael Keller explains that a knock is a Norwegian crone. So it's like an old woman.
I got it right. Yeah. I'm an economist, me. Look at the things I get right.
There you go. Now we are in fact experts and not just artists. Okay, so let's move on to the final story, and it's also pretty interesting. Iceland is poised to ban male circumcision. So, Iceland is on the verge of becoming the first country in the world to ban male circumcision. Of course, this doesn't come without its challenges, much to the dismay of the of this country's Jewish and Muslim population. Iceland, yes. They're going to be first, it seems, if it goes through. Iceland already...
The Jewish and Muslim population.
In Iceland, yes. The Jewish and Muslim population, in fact, in Iceland. I didn't even know.
It's not as high as it is in Sweden, is what I'm saying.
Not quite, no.
Oy vey, shut it down.
If passed, a 6-year jail term would be given to anyone who removes part of or all of a child's sexual organs for non-medical reasons. It's also worth pointing out that they've already outlawed female circumcision in 2005. Seems odd that they would need to outlaw that so late, but okay.
Does this write-up mention Ireland at all? I've only just noticed how funny it is that if you change the C to an R, you get a completely different story. Because in Ireland at the moment, there's some kind of, I don't know if it's a minister, but it's some kind of high-end person who happens to be a Muslim who's considered making female genital mutilation legal in Ireland.
Oh, God.
To accommodate people who you wouldn't want to offend. That sort of story, you know.
Yeah. Seems like there's been
you got the opposite thing happening in Iceland. It's very much Iceland are the good guys and Ireland are the what the fuck guys.
It's almost like there's been a shift in their cultural belief system enough in Ireland. They're thinking about changing the rules a little bit. Interesting.
It's a very short ferry trip to Ireland. It's a bloody long one to Iceland. I think that's what it is.
All right, so there will be a 6-year jail term that would be given to anybody who removes part or all of a child's sexual organs for non-medical reasons. Iceland's total population is only about 336,000. Wow. There's more people in this city than there is in the entire country of Iceland. That's a lot of Bjorks. Of that, 1,500 are Muslim and 250 are Jewish. Worldwide, 30% of male infants born are circumcised. 2/3 of them are Muslim. So, that's worldwide, yeah. Icelandic Jews and Muslims say that if male circumcision is outlawed, the practice will go underground or they will travel to countries where it is legal to have it done.
Just like FGM.
Indeed. I wonder if this Jewish population is going to stay at 250 or if it's going to go down because of the other population. Anyway, there are some quotes that I want to read that are essentially of people that are responding to this. Now, because it seems to me that since the population is not, like, it's a lot higher than the Muslim and Jewish population, even though they're taking issue with it, it doesn't look like it'll pass, and that most likely the criminalization of male circumcision will likely go through, of which I am hopeful for, because that's what we want. However, we may as well hear from these clerics to see what their thoughts are. So, these are quotes from Ahmad Sadiq, the Egyptian-born Imam of the Islamic Cultural Center of Iceland. He says, "This is an attack on freedom of religion. What's the point in banning something that does not really exist?"
I'll have to stop you there. Didn't Iceland recently do something regarding the wage gap?
Did Iceland do that?
I think, yeah, they officially tried to end the wage gap. I forget how. I'm going to have to read into this, but yeah. There's no, because they are a Scandinavian country. They're the ones who invented the trolls. They have the most feminists. So, yeah, they tried to do something about the wage gap.
Yeah, as I say, the United Nations a while back actually called Iceland the most egalitarian nation, and I think he for she highlighted it as well. Mad Cat actually wrote an article about this for the Honey Badger Brigade, and I don't see the date on the article. Our article's
it's
still
because
don't show the dates.
It's because it's so isolated and has such a low population. It's much like the Vatican City.
Yeah.
They have a bunch of records. Like they have the highest crime rate of anywhere in Europe, and the highest something or other. It happens naturally, statistically, if you have a very small nation with a very small population.
He did some analysis on the 2014 report and found that obviously that this was an incorrect award. They awarded them something, or basically gave them some kudos for this, and it was unmerited. The article actually was, "Is Iceland as egalitarian as the UN thinks?" And it was a good article. So I would recommend people look it up and read it. But yeah, Iceland was being pushed by feminists and ideologues as this great bastion of egalitarianism at one point.
Well, there you go.
And yet they're not going with the misogyny angle in Iceland, weirdly enough, or at least according to the media. They're very much going with the this is anti-Semitism.
That's the
I often wondered if this would be how they would go with it. Is this how they're going to go with it if this ever comes up in America?
Oh yeah, it's already been done
because of the fucking 5,000 Jews in fucking America.
It's already been done.
Never mind the fucking 150. What is it? 75 million American men who have it done.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those are Jewish? Absolutely negligible.
Yeah,
I can't remember whether it was the entire state or part of California, but there was a big debate over outlawing circumcision in an area of California. This has been several years ago, because I was still writing articles on Gather.com, and Gather.com isn't a social network anymore. But the discussion, the anti-Semitism card is actually in some circles more powerful than the misogyny card, because it's you have this history of have been several instances throughout history of attacks on the Jews, and so ending, of course, with the Holocaust. Everybody is terrified of being accused of furthering this, of wanting to be the next Holocaust perpetrator, of hating the people that generally do have one of the most powerful victim narratives in existence. And this is not to say that Judaism is this big exploiter of a victim narrative and all powerful. This is not Jew conspiracy stuff, so don't even go there. This is social justice warriors are able to use the anti-Semitism card against some groups of people. They are able to use that card easier and more effectively even than the anti-woman card. In fact, if you put the anti-Semitism card up against the misogyny card, in some circles, the misogyny card would lose. And the dumb thing about this is the Jewish population overall is not settled on circumcision. Everybody acts like this is, everybody who's Jewish does this, and everybody who's Jewish has to do this, and everybody who's Jewish approves of this, and if you disapprove of it, it's because you hate Jews. Well, actually, there's Jewish intactivism, and there are websites. Look up Jenny Goodman, MD, Jewish Circumcision: An Alternative Perspective by Jenny Goodman, MD. On Alternative Rituals by Ronald Goldman, PhD. You have the movie Cut, Saved My Son's Foreskin, a movie by Diane Targovnik. Yeah, there are several different things that you can look up. I have links to this information on Breaking the Glasses on my Intactivist Links page.
Jews are remarkably good at reforming their religion. They've done it many, many times. That's how they've longevity. Which is more than can be said for the forces that massively outweigh them, that are actually keeping circumcision a thing in the culture.
And what you'll find is when the power of the anti-Semitism card runs out, because either Jewish intactivism ends up leading to reform again, or it becomes a moot point, that the push against circumcision outweighs that card, then you'll start to see the Islamophobic card get pushed. But I mean, even Howard Stern has been he's been very vocal about this. He's spoken up quite a bit about this as well, and about Jewish intactivism. So this is something that, honestly, the anti-Semitism card is kind of invalid. because it's not about the religion. People who oppose circumcision aren't opposing circumcision because they want to prevent Jews from practicing their religion. It isn't even about the beliefs behind the practice at all.
Mm-hmm.
It is about the rights of the child, and it is about bodily autonomy. It is about not doing damage to a body of a person who cannot consent to that damage. And any other type of body modification, whether it is religion-centered or not, you can't just modify your child's body. You can't even tattoo your child, which is not necessarily as harmful, unless you're introducing something harmful into the child's system. It doesn't remove anything it doesn't remove anything that's necessary, because it doesn't remove anything at all. Yet you can't do it. So the idea that this type of body modification should just be ignored because religion is an irrational and dishonest argument.
Yeah, your friendly neighborhood argument when arguing with someone who's in favor of circumcision for either religious or whatever other reasons they can conjure, please don't get too angry. You're never going to convince them.
Yeah.
This is a conversation I've had with lots of people in private now. This conversation will drive you mental. It will drain your faith in humanity if you try to convince people who are otherwise dogmatically convinced not to do this. They'll reach out to religion is one of the things they'll do. They'll reach out like tentacle beasts to whatever they can find. And it's only going to make you more and more angry until something snaps. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I feel the need to remind people that you can't reason people out of this. It's more powerful than any religion, as I think we've sort of gone over in the course of this conversation. This is something that transcends religion, regardless of a person's religion. This is something that they will argue until they're every color in the rainbow in the face, and you'll never get through to them. So don't let it piss you off too much.
I got to point out something else. It's when people are willing to exploit someone else's religion, and that is what happens with this topic. Because 9 times out of 10, when I have gotten into a discussion with someone on circumcision and they brought up the anti-Semitism card, they're not Jewish. And I've actually had Jewish intactivists in discussion with me have to argue against Gentiles using the anti-Semitism card in anti-circumcision versus circumcision discussions. People are so dedicated that they will tell a Jewish person that he is wrong about your intactivism being anti-Semitic, even though they're not Jewish. That's when it's time to kind of walk away from the conversation. You say, well, your ears are closed, your mind is closed. I'm not going to talk about this with you anymore because it's not worth it.
This is an abyss you must not stare into. There are other abysses that you could get a ball game going with. This one will just stare right back eventually. Don't do it.
So I have some super chats I want to get through before we move on to the rest of the story. Let's see. Alec Undusco gives us $20 and says, Mike, I wanted to thank you for your efforts and hope you get first-class flying for court in July. Doge, glad to have you back, man. Well, thank you. And then Leaf gave us 10 crones. Crones. And didn't say anything. So I don't know if you wanted to say something and maybe you didn't. But thanks for the crones nonetheless. And then Alec Undusco gives us another $5.
I will have sex with the crones, I promise.
Yes. Alec Undusco gives us $5 more and says YouTube needs to make super comments for regular videos. These super chats for regular videos that are not live. I'm pretty sure that's what he means by that. You know what? That's not a bad idea. Maybe they should put a tip jar or something on there. And then Leaf gives us 10 more crones or kronas or whatever. Thank you for that. Meanwhile, in our main HBR channels chat, because that was the Badger. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the HBR chat. I think this is the live stream chat. I may have it backwards. Nonetheless, in our other chat, Mark the Atheist gave us $10 and says, sadly, as tiny as the USA Jewish pop is, their ridiculous overrepresentation in medicine, academia, business, and media will probably mean a similar anti-circumcision legal effort will be fought against tooth and nail. And then Hoki Bukisa gives us $5 and says, how meaningful is a religious ritual done on someone else's behalf? He poses the question. So, thank you for the super chats. Definitely some food for thought. Let me go on and read the rest of this article, because there's just a couple more. It's not an article, but it's the summarization with the other quotes. So, the medical benefits of this practice far exceed the risks. This is another quote by Ahmad Sadiq, the Imam of the Islamic Cultural Center of Iceland. Then there is a quote from Mila UK, a British group that protects the Jewish community's right to carry out religious circumcision. Quote, for a country such as Iceland that considers itself a liberal democracy, to ban it, thus making sustainable Jewish life in the community impossible, is extremely concerning. Followed by another quote from Cardinal Reinhard Marx. No, it's Reinhard Marx, probably no relation. President of the Brussels-based Catholic Church in the European Union. Protecting the health of children is a legitimate goal of every society, but in this case, it is being used without any scientific basis to stigmatize certain religious communities. Thank you, Catholics. And then lastly, quote from Celia Dog. Oh my God, this is a brutal name. Celia Dirk Gunnar's daughter, a lawmaker from the center-right Progressive Party. We are talking about children's rights, not about freedom of belief. Everyone has the right to believe in what they want, but the rights of children come right above the right to believe. Okay, Gunnar's daughter proposed the male circumcision ban after realizing the female circumcision ban had no male equivalent. The Icelandic bill on circumcision has cross-party backing and wide public support, Gunnar's daughter said. If it passes the first reading, the bill will go into committee stage for several months before it can become law. So,
I love it that they keep trotting out the woozle that the medical benefits of circumcision outweigh the risks. The only medical benefit of circumcision is that you do not have to quite as carefully maintain your hygiene in order to avoid certain otherwise avoidable issues. It has been demonstrably proved that the research that led to the conclusion that circumcision helps to reduce your chances of contracting HIV was flawed enough that it doesn't prove that. And other research has proved that that is not the case. It has no effect on whether or not you're going to contract HIV in a sex encounter. So the HIV benefit is nil. The supposed cancer benefit is nil, because that is not the only part of the penis that gets cancer. And you could say it about any part of the body. You can remove any part of the body under the excuse, if this is gone, you won't get cancer in it. It doesn't make removing it right. God, I can't think of the name of that phimosis, that problem that's basically basically your foreskin becomes less elastic. That's a problem of hygiene, and it can be actually treated with hormone creams steroid creams and stretching. There's really nothing. Urinary tract infections, even they claim that urinary tract infections are something that gets prevented. That's not even true. You're more likely to get a urinary tract infection if you're not protected. But to do all of these things that some of which it doesn't do, and some of which are preventable through proper hygiene practices, they want you to cut an opening in the skin of an infant, in a location on that infant where the wound is going to be exposed to bacteria-laden urine and feces during the first week of the child's life, when the immune system is not even fully developed. And I will tell you from personal experience, I learned in the hospital when they thought my newborn son had an infection, they had to do a spinal tap. You know why? Because the barrier between the spinal fluid and the rest of your body, your blood and everything, isn't formed well enough to prevent germs that are in your body from invading your spinal fluid and getting into your brain. So at the riskiest possible time for a child to get an infection, they are exposing that child's circulatory system through a wound in the skin to the bacteria in fecal matter. How stupid to say that the benefits outweigh the risks. That's an amazing risk. That's an insane risk. Why would you even consider that not to be as big of a risk as they might get a urinary tract infection when they get older? They might have to use creams and stretching to treat phimosis when they get older. You know, we might slightly reduce their chance of contracting various diseases that would be better prevented by using condoms and engaging in smart sex practices instead of promiscuity. How arrogant to turn around and say by doing this thing that actually is a terrible risk, we're actually giving this child more benefits than the risk. Why don't you let the child be the judge of that when he gets old enough to make the decision for himself?
Yeah. But on the plus side, it looks like it's going to go through more than likely. So I hope it does, and maybe other people will start to follow suit. Other countries will start to follow suit, and we'll see circumcision for what it is. It's probably the easiest men's rights talking point that you could argue for, but it's also got, as Mike was pointing out, a lot of emotionally charged rage behind it. Like, have you seen
the annoying thing about it is most of the things we talk about involve liberating men, involve giving people more rights when it comes to men's lives and their life choices. But this is the one where we're saying, no, let's make a thing illegal. Let's make a law where one more thing is illegal, and that's not very libertarian. And for the most part, most of us are sort of at least a little bit small L libertarian. Mm-hmm. The idea of making yet another thing illegal, sort of, you can see why it would rub us the wrong way while we try to do the right thing. The idea is to make everything legal, but to convince everyone not to do it, or at least the largest feasible proportion of people not to do it.
Yeah.
But as long as we've got this law and order thing going on, where we've got police persons running around arresting people for tweets, we might as well use this law and order system for, bringing baby torturers to justice.
Well, think about it this way. All right. Why is it illegal to punch your child in the face? Just walk up to your child. You didn't clean your room. I asked you to clean your room. Bam! Right in the jaw with your... Why is that illegal?
Well, it's the initiation of force.
It's a violation of your child's right to not be abused. And we recognize that right. We recognize that right the same as we recognize your right to not get shot in the face by your neighbor. You took my parking space. Blam! The protection of individual rights is an appropriate use of the law. If we have to have laws, if we have to have a government, if we have to have a society in which we tell people what they can or cannot do, the most basic libertarian use of that is we set the boundary of where your rights end and another person's begin. And bodily autonomy is one of those measures. Circumcision is, at least neonatal circumcision, involuntary circumcision, circumcision without consent, is a violation of the right to bodily autonomy. It's a violation of the right to bodily integrity. And that is what necessitates, or at least justifies, considering laws preventing people from doing it to anyone who is not old enough to decide to do it to themselves, or to have it done to themselves. And that's it.
Yeah, I just see it like it's the initiation of force. And if that's sort of like a central principle, people in authority should not be, you shouldn't be doing this to people who don't have a choice. And babies don't have a choice in the matter. If you let them grow up and if they decide afterwards they want to do it, then that's their business. But yeah, in this case, I think what I noticed, the emotion comes in, and I know we got to close out because we've almost gone for 2 hours, which is twice as long as I was shooting for, but whatever. I noticed that the hardest people to talk to about circumcision are parents that had already circumcised their child. That is something that is extremely difficult to do, because the idea that they've harmed their kid in some significant way when they thought they were doing what was right or what was standard procedure or whatever, or for religious reasons, will drive them mad, and they could become violent. So be careful with that. You could find a video of a guy who was an intactivist, and he was approached by he was out in the street protesting or making essentially just demonstrating, and a man argued with him, and over time you come to the realization that the man who argued with him was a father who had his son circumcised and didn't realize the damage he had done. And it just made him really furious, and he was violent towards this intactivist. So it's difficult to talk about, but obviously very important. And I'm glad that Iceland is making progress, and I hope that that this works out for them, and I hope that more people follow suit. So
this is an example of how you can't expect things to change in the space of a generation, let alone in the space of a meme cycle, which I think is about a season at this point, like a quarter of a year.
Mm-hmm.
These are changes that quite palpably aren't going to take place within this generation. It's going to take at least 2, probably 4, maybe 8. You do the math.
Yeah.
Have patience, grasshopper.
Well, and when you're dealing with parents who have circumcised their kids, one of the things that it's important to remember is the parents didn't wake up in the morning and decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to go have part of my kid's dick cut off. This is something that they did because the experts around them, whom they believed, gave them a narrative that convinced them that this was a wise choice that was beneficial for their child. They were sold snake oil. And nobody wants to admit they bought snake oil. But it's a lot easier to talk to someone about the snake oil salesman and the scam the snake oil salesman ran on them than it is to talk to someone that you are accusing of deliberately feeding their children snake oil. And, these parents, a lot of these parents, they're going to get defensive because they don't want to admit they did something wrong. But the reality is they made what they were led to believe was the best decision for their children. They were not trying to do something wrong. They were not malicious. They were not abusive. Their doctor was.
There you go.
Yeah, when it comes to Santa Claus, there's really no one to blame except the smoke monster of tradition. But when it comes to this same kind of circular lies we tell when it comes to circumcision, yeah, there are medical professionals involved there who should know better.
Okay, thank you for those closing statements. I'm going to read a couple of super chats, and then we are going to be ending the show. So I want to thank Mike and Hannah and Max for coming on, and those of you guys who are watching, thank you so much for joining us on this week of HBR news. Let us know what you think about the little changes we made in terms of, some of the scene shifts and stuff. I want to know what your feedback is on that. I want to make it slicker and give you guys something to look at while we're talking. So, it really helps to get as much feedback as possible. I am kind of juggling shit over here, but thanks so much for your patience, and I hope that everything is working out well for you guys in terms of sound and visuals and everything. So now on to the super chats. Leaf Malif gave us 10 more kronas, and then he gave us another 20. Didn't write any commentary, so thank you so much for that, for the donations. Oh, he also says, I'm sorry, he did say something. Male genital mutilation is a violation against the UN's human rights. Okay, well, thank you for that. I agree with that, although I think the UN is a joke. And that's probably why they don't really consider it a violation, or at least they're not really that vocal in fighting against it. French Honey Badger gives us $5 and says, libertarianism does not mean no laws. Anything that is initiation of aggression against peaceful individuals is, by that standard, illegal. Yes, it means no rulers. Well, that's anarchism, but it does have rules.
Children without being at least a little bit. Oh, I'm not getting into it again.
Okay, all right. Let's not. You know how the ANCAPs get. Okay, Wise Mage 0 gives us $5 Canadian and says, "Avenge my foreskin." And then Leaf Malif gives us another $20 and says, "Hannah, does MGM feels different?" Oh, I think he means sexually, right? Maybe. Does it feel different to the woman? I mean, I don't know. Maybe you need to clarify that. Well, something to think about.
Okay. There's research on this, actually. And damn it, I just closed my list of links. So I'm going to send you to my activist page. I need to put this on the Honey Badger Brigade blog because really breaking the glasses is kind of defunct. I don't do anything with it anymore.
Just go to honeybadgerbrigade.com. There'll be a link up there you can look at.
Yeah.
There's probably other useful articles on it if you're curious.
But just the research indicates that there is a greater amount of sexual dysfunction among both sexes when the man is circumcised than when the man is not. The research indicates that there is a greater need for lubrication. The research indicates that there is a greater problem of things like tearing and scarring and stuff like that. And the research indicates that there is later in life a greater amount of sexual dysfunction in males where they end up needing erectile dysfunction drugs more if they are circumcised. But it's kind of hard to tell because that research it's done in countries where men live longer because of being first world, particularly the United States. So it's kind of hard to tell if that's happening because here in the U.S. men live long. And then we also have the diabetes epidemic, which may be a contributing factor as well because that can cause erectile dysfunction. So it's kind of hard to tell. Like my anecdotal evidence, if I give you that, that's one person. And it's not actually a whole lot of anecdotal evidence. So from one person. So I would advise reading the research instead, because what I tell you might be, as much as it is the truth of my own experience, it might be abnormal experience. And like according to the research, it's not, but it's more accurate to get the information from research that has a wealth of experiences rather than just my own.
And the only history we have is a history of condoms and vasectomies. Once we've got a few generations of vasal gel under our belt, we'll see exactly how that changes things. So to speak.
That rhymed. Okay, we got 2 more super chats. So I gotta scroll up a bit, and then I'm closing us out. That Lolicon gave us $5. That one right there, and he or she writes, "I'm just donating to the Witness Fund." Thank you, Lolicon. You can always count on Lolicons to give you money, I guess. And then Cameron Jones gives us $10 and writes, "Nurse here. Watching a circumcision in school was traumatic, and the female classmates chuckled at the guy's reactions. Planning on talking to my brother and sister before they have kids. So, please do that. Thank you very much. And with that...
That's blown the stereotype right out of the water.
Yeah.
You know, it's incredibly disturbing that female students in that classroom thought the guys' reactions were funny instead of having sympathy for them. That's like women in medicine, guys, right there. Never feel bad when you are in a medical setting about asking for a guy to be present when you're receiving treatment in a sensitive area, because that just blows my mind.
Yep. Just reverse the genders and think about that. Would we even stand for it? Okay. So with that said,
I've never found it funny or in any way arousing that a gash would have a gash in it.
No.
It's not the circumcision itself. It's the fact that they were unsympathetic to the guy's reactions to it. I mean, I've seen people laugh at stuff like that. I was in anatomy and physiology right after the oh crap, I can't think of the name of the chick that cut her husband's penis off and made the news. Bobbitt,
one?
Lorena Bobbitt. After that story came out, we're dealing with genitals. We were learning the anatomy of genitals, and we had genitals that were not attached to a human body. They were, models of genitals. So there was a dick on a stick on a pedestal, on a little platform. And I looked down at the platform, and it was from Bobbitt Laboratories. And I drew one of the other students' attention to it. We didn't get anything else done that day. We were all laughing about the coincidence, but nobody thought a cut off dick was funny. It was the coincidence. And if the guys had been cringing and going, "Oh God," I don't think any of the women in that class would have been like, "Ha ha." That is what blows my mind. The idea that they have that visceral reaction because they're imagining a pain, and these women thought that was funny. That's just no.
Maybe this is just an evolutionary set-in because men's genitals are on the outside, and you can't really cut off a women's genitals. It's one of those ways in which women are more strong, folks. We're here to remind you of such things.
There you go. And with that, I'm going to close this out. So everybody, we'll see you in the after show if you're a patron and you have those privileges. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next HBR.